going back to your hometown, but not just your hometown, but the house that you kind of grew up in. And there's a lot of fond memories in that house. There's a lot of things. But the thing that is so neat so many times that my kids get to be there, usually what my parents' house represents, it represents the love and relationship that we have as a family. And so to get to come to one place, one set house, and that may be your house, that may be your parents' house, that may be your grandparents' house, but it's a house that you go to on holidays. And it's really interesting that that's what God has set up for the nation of Israel in these three particular holidays, is that they would come to His house. And they would be reminded of something, that it wasn't just something that they would come to His house and then leave it there. It's something they'd be reminded of, something that would flow back into their everyday physical lives. And so that's what we're going to get into today as we talk about these feasts. And so what I want you to go to Leviticus chapter 23. It's fine that PowerPoint or that slide is up there. It's a little bit early. But in Leviticus chapter 23, excuse me, goodness. And starting in verse 9. This is the first of those three feasts, okay? Here it is. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I give you and reap its harvest, you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord, so that you may be accepted. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. And on the day when you wave the sheaf, you shall offer a male lamb, a year old without blemish, as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the grain offering with it shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, a food offering to the Lord with a pleasing aroma, and the drink offering with it shall be of wine, 1/4 of a hin. And you shall eat neither bread nor grain parched or fresh until this same day, until you have brought the offering of your God. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings." Sometimes as we read through the Old Testament, we don't really know timeline or kind of what's going on. And so what we've talked about already is the Passover. And what God said about the Passover is the Passover is when He saved the children of Israel from Egypt. And He says, look, this is your Independence Day. This is going to be the start of your calendar. This is going to be the start of your new life. And so this shall be the first month for you. And what that month is the month of, I don't know if I'm going to say this right. I should have had somebody Google it and say it for me. But Nisan or Nisan, okay? Don't make fun of me. I just preach here, okay? You can read it yourself. Say it however you want to. But my point is He says this is the first month, and on the 14th day of that month, that's when you will sacrifice this lamb that you've been keeping up and that you've been kind of pampering for this moment, and it's going to remind you of the blood of the lamb that has saved you from Egypt. And we talked about that event last week, and how now Jesus has said it's not going to be some lamb. Now, when you eat of this meal, when you partake of this, you're going to do that remembering me. The blood of the Lamb that takes away the sins of the whole world. And it's something they didn't just do once a year. It's something they did on a weekly basis that drew them to God's salvation. But then that started in that same first month of their year. That started another feast, or is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay? And there's a week of unleavened bread. It wasn't necessarily a feast. It was just that basically there's not going to be any leaven in your house. You're going to get all the leaven out. And all the bread that you eat, it's not going to have leaven in it, because I'm a holy God. And you're to be set apart from the rest of the world. And so it was a reminder to leave sin, to leave worldliness, and live holy lives. It was 7 days to commemorate that. We talked about that last week, 7 days. But there was another event that was supposed to happen. And it happened on the 16th of the same month, of the first month of their year. And it was the Feast of First Fruits. And this is when every male from every family would go to Jerusalem. And it would be the Sabbath. It would be the Sabbath after Passover, roughly 3 days, 2 to 3 days after Passover. And it would be this Feast of the First Fruits where every male would go, and they would bring the first and the best of the grain offering. And this is right about barley. If I read it right, it's right during the barley season of that time. It's right during the barley harvest. And he says, before you eat any grain from that harvest, what I want you to do is I want you to come to Jerusalem, and I want you to present it as an offering. And what the priest would do is you would bring it to the priest and wave it before the altar, signifying a gift to God of the best and the first of what God has blessed them with that harvest. And then what you would do is you would sacrifice another lamb. And then you would have a meal offering, if you will, presenting basically fellowship with God, it's representative of a meal with God. Such a powerful thing that God instituted, that every leader of the household would come and be a part of, presenting God with the first of what He had blessed them. And so as we look at this and we see this today, what does this mean for us? What does this look like for us? Deuteronomy chapter 8, and why did they even do this? What was the purpose for that? If you read your notes, it goes a lot better. But they'd make this burnt offering, they'd present a meal offering and a drink offering at the same time, which represent fellowship, relationship offering. And here's why. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 8. Deuteronomy chapter 8. And this is what they did every year. At the first month of the year, on the 16th day of the month, that every man came into Jerusalem to do this. They would come to the temple of God to do this. Deuteronomy chapter 8, starting in verse 6. So you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in His ways and by fearing Him. For Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs flowing out in the valleys and the hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig copper, and you shall eat and be full, and you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land He has given you. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping His commandments and His rules and statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water, but brought you water out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna that your fathers did not know, that He might humble you and test you to do you good in the end. Beware, lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you power to get wealth, that He may confirm His covenant that He swore to your fathers, as it is to this day. You see, why did God create this rhythm? Why did God create this calendar? Why did God create these festivals? It was to draw them back to the reality of His providence and His provision. It was to draw them back to His goodness and His mercy. It was to draw them back to the goodness that they were continually living in. But it was to draw them back into His relationship and His strength and His power. He says, because you're going to go into a land flowing with milk and honey, you're going to go into a land that you're not going to have a need for, and you're going to build it up in your heart that you've done this. And guys, if we're honest with ourselves, that's what we do in America as well. That we live in a land of plenty. We live in a land where we have good jobs. We live in a land where we don't have a whole lot of needs, felt needs. Even though we do have felt needs, we don't have a whole lot of intrinsic needs. And so the reality is in those moments, those are the deepest moments that we forget about God. So many times we lose the sight of God in the blessings that He is giving us. And so God continually, He knew to draw Israel back to their deliverance. to the deliverance from slavery, not just in that, but Him giving a land flowing with milk and honey, a land that they did not make with their own hands, but was given to them by God. So God continually drew them back. He says, don't forget. And so He set these feasts in motion. He set these things in motion so that we wouldn't forget. And so many times when we think about these commands, He says, don't forget the Lord, don't forget the commands. We think that we do these things for God. We think God does these things. We think that God needs this. But the reality of it is you and I need this. Do you think God needs a grain offering? Do you think God needs this grain to sustain Himself? No. God needed His people to understand that He was working in their lives and He was blessing them beyond measure, that they were seeing in every moment of their lives, but they needed to be drawn back because in their blessing, they could forget Him. And so it was to draw them back. And so God continually brought them into His presence, brought them to His house to remember His salvation, His holiness, His provision, and His goodness. That's what the Feast of First Fruits represents, is come to my house to remember the fellowship that we have and that everything that you have is from me. And so they offered the first of what God gave. And so here's three things that I want us to think about today, and this is what it means for us. Three things that as we look at this Feast of the First Fruits, is this something that we're going to do? Maybe not, but it's something that we can fill this into our calendars, and what can we do, and just something to think about that makes this very real for us. And here it is right here. Here's the first thing. Center yourself around God. This is the first thing this feast represents, is to center your life around God, not God around your life. This is probably one of our biggest drifts as American Christians. This is our biggest problem with American Christianity. Okay? I built that up because I hope that we're listening to this. And I might step on some toes here. Okay? That's not the point of this. But I want us to understand something. That we live in a culture that so many times we schedule our relationship with God around our activities. Okay? And I'm going to point some stuff out. This may hit some of us, may not hit other parts of us. Travel ball. People who play travel ball. We play travel ball. Okay? And this is a drift in our life as well. But what we do is we like to play travel ball. We like to do that in our lives. And then we have worship out on the ball field. We like to bring God with us and circle Him around our life. You know what that's like? That'd be like somebody who's harvesting this barley harvest, and on the 16th of Nisan, that they don't want to leave the field to come to Jerusalem to offer their first fruit offering. You see, we want to circle God around our lives, around our schedules, around what we're doing. We want God to be we want God close. We want God to be a part of what we're doing, but we don't want to give up anything of our schedules to do it. And so we move Him and we meander Him and we put Him as a part of our lives, but we don't make Him the focal point of it. We're out working, we're out doing our hobbies, we're out doing our vacations. We have a thought of God, but it's almost like we've included Him in our schedules instead of made Him our schedule and the rhythm of our hearts. We drag Him along, but not make Him the priority. We plan our lives around our desires, around our aspirations, and neglect our relationship with Him. We actually do what James warned us about in James chapter 5, if you want to go over there. James chapter 5. Look what it says here. In verse 13, he says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit." And he's talking about boasting about tomorrow. He's saying you're not in control or don't have the destiny of your life planned out. He says, but look at this. "Yet you do not know what tomorrow may bring. What is your life? For you're a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. He's saying you're planning your whole lives out around yourselves and you've forgotten God. It's not like if the Lord wills it, we're going to go play ball tomorrow. If the Lord wills it, we're going to go do this. It's not that. It's saying that you make all of your plans around your aspirations, your desires. You think that you're captain of your own destiny, and you don't have any thought process of God, and you've become prideful and boastful in that. He says, what is your life? You're nothing without God. And so don't drag God along. The idea of and the whole purpose of this, understand, there's a lot of hard-working Jewish men out there during the Old Testament days, even in the days of Jesus. There's a lot of men who it hurt them a little bit to take whatever journey it was to go to Jerusalem. It probably affected them a little bit to give up that much work, to stop working, to go to God's house, to offer this first fruits of thankfulness. But it was God saying, no, come into my presence. Come to me. I'm going to draw you away from this world. I'm going to draw you into relationship with me deeper. And that's what the offering represented. That's what coming to Jerusalem represented. And so in our lives, we need to center ourselves around God. Guys, I'm going to tell you, listen to me, for the sake of your family, for the sake of your children, for the sake of the legacy you're wanting to give, because we're all giving a legacy, you need to center yourself around God. And I'll tell you one of the biggest things, it's not the only thing, but one of the greatest ways that you can show that your life is centered around God is to come to church. Like that's the most real way that your children say, boy, this is important to us. This is a big deal. It's the way that your spouse sees it. It's the way that your coworkers, that people see it. Yes, it's living a holy life. You can't just come to church and live like the world the rest of the time. It's not that there's this separation between church and your real life. But the reality of it is, for lack of a better way to put this, coming into God's house to center ourselves around God, making this a priority, that this relationship means something, that God's people mean something, that I'm not just going to drag him along in every part of life. I saw a preacher's post yesterday, does God ever win? That was his post. Does God ever win? I should have put it up there for you. But it was, does God ever win? And the point he was making is that there's this struggle between our schedules and God. Does God ever win in that struggle? Does God ever get chosen above your work schedule, your hobby schedule, your play schedule, your whatever schedule it is, your family schedule? Does God ever win above your schedules? God set this feast so that we would center ourselves, so that Israel would center themselves around God and His provision, what He's doing in this world. What about us? Next thing they did. Next thing that this represented, this feast represented the fighting away of the pride of life. It represented us living humbly in view of God and His provision. Deuteronomy 8:17, he says, "Beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth." It's me. I've done this. We can sit and we can look at what God has given us, and we can look at our bank accounts. We can look at the food that's on the table. We can look at the cars we drive. We can look at what we're providing for our families, and we can elevate ourselves and say, wow, I have done this. We can be like Nebuchadnezzar. Is this not great Babylon that I have built? But you see, God put it in rhythm, and God put it in their calendars that they would be humble, that you're going to come to the house of God to offer the first of this abundance that God has given you. And so that you would realize that it's all from God. That we are here, you and I are here by the grace, the mercy, and the provision of God. Sometimes we can get so caught up in the gift that we actually forget the giver. Did you know that? And I know we've talked about that before, the idea of getting caught up in the gift. You see, when the gift the gift is only meant to draw us to the giver. Can you imagine a woman who receives a diamond ring from her husband? A diamond ring that's meant to show his love and affection, just how much she means to him, and how much of his heart she has, and how precious she is to him. And that woman, she goes off and she shows the ring to everybody, but doesn't even mention the husband. Can you imagine? What would you think about that woman? Or vice versa, if a woman got a man a gift. The gift is never meant to be the most precious thing. Even as precious as a diamond ring or a high-dollar diamond ring, that gift is not meant to be the precious thing that attracts your mind to it. It's that when a woman sees it, that it draws her mind to the giver. No matter how precious or how valuable or how great the gift is, but what happens is in our lives, our drift is as we drift towards the gift and our eyes focus on the gift and we forget about the giver. And it builds us up in pride because of the gift that we have. And thinking that that's what it's about. But God draws us back. He draws us back. The gift is meant to draw us to a deeper love and affection for the giver. Pride and arrogance drags us away from God, and we need reminders in our life of God's grace and provision so that pride melts away. And the third thing is this. The Feast of First Fruits, what it represented is this right here, is giving God the best, not just the leftovers. Giving God the best. This feast was just that. It was the first and the best of the harvest. None of the new harvest was to be eaten until after this feast. You didn't make it into bread. You didn't do anything with this harvest until after this date. Until you waved this grain offering before God and you thanked Him for the harvest. And so it was to recenter the minds of giving God the best that because of what He had done for them. It was a reminder. It was a reminder to give God the best, not just the harvest, but not just of the harvest, but of one's own life. And what I want to ask you as we think about this feast, what I want to ask you is, and I want you to think about this, what about you? When you look at your life, are you giving God the best? Are you giving God the best of your time or energy? Because a lot of times we think about maybe giving of our finances. We'll talk about that. Are you giving God the first of your finances? That's fine. Is God's giving you everything you have? Is it for His glory, or do you hold some of that back? That's fine to talk about. But does God get the best of your energy? You know, we always talk about being tired or our schedules or whatever that looks like. We've all done it where we've prayed at night. We lay down at bed and we're praying at night and we just fall asleep. I'm not judging you over that. But it just seems like sometimes God gets our leftovers, that we're so worn out. Maybe we're at work, then we scroll on our phones, then we do entertainment, then whatever it is, whether hobbies or sports, that we're just beaten. We go to bed and we don't have a mindset for God until we wake up the next morning, and then we're just going to go do the rat race all over again. And then we just kind of fit God in every once in a while. Like you and I know if God is getting our best or if He's just getting the leftovers of our life. If God's getting the first fruits, or if He's just getting what we've already mumbled through, right? But we can correlate this with our time and our energy, our money, our affections, our heart and our mind, our thoughts and our devotion. Does God get our best? Because that's what this whole festival was about. Was giving God the first and the best because of what He has given to us. You know what's real interesting is you look in the New Testament, the phrase first fruits appears 7 times. 6 of those times, it's referring directly to Jesus Christ. And what's really powerful about this is that Jesus was crucified, or Jesus went on trial during the killing of the Passover lamb, during Passover. On that first day of unleavened bread. And what's really neat is Jesus was resurrected on the day of first fruits, on that 16th. And as you look at this, we need to understand something, that This doesn't just correlate with something that was a festival 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. This correlates to what God has given us, that He has given us the first fruits, His Son, as a sacrifice for you and I. That He's given the best offering that can be made to make us His children. That He doesn't call us to go to a building 3 times a year to remember Him, to make sacrifice, to be reminded of His relationship. No, He says, I'll come and dwell in you, and you'll daily be remembered, or you'll daily remember the relationship I have with you because of my Son, Jesus Christ. And so, guys, we've been given something so much greater in our lives. We've been given the greatest gift possible, the greatest salvation, the greatest provision imaginable. And what I want to ask us today is this. And what I want you to think about today is this, is what does that do for you? Does that center your life around God? Does that center your life around God? Does that fight away the pride and the arrogance that comes when we start focusing on the gift more than we do the giver? Does that make us want to give our best and stop giving God just the leftovers of my life? You see, we all have a decision that we need to make. We all have a purpose for our lives. And that is create a rhythm and a heartbeat that says, God, I'm going to center my life around you. I'm not just going to drag you into my aspirations. That I'm going to live centered around Him every day. That I'm going to live humble and grateful for what God is continually doing in His provision and salvation. I'm never again going to offer my leftovers to God and think that that's going to be okay when He's asked me to give the first and the best of my life. Let me ask you something. I know we don't have a special holiday, but during this time of Thanksgiving, because this was on my mind, this is what I thought about. That's how we live thankful lives. Being centered around God, living humbly as Him as our giver, to Him as our giver, and giving the best of everything I am. We know where we're at. We know what we need to do. This is that moment. This can be that moment on a weekly basis that we can be reminded, that we can be drawn back to what God is doing in His provision and His salvation and His giving of His Son, so we can live for Him, drawn to Him more than we ever have been. My plead for you this morning is don't leave here with a bigger commitment to God than you ever have had. In living in gratitude and thankfulness and living a life centered around Him and humility of Him, and in giving Him the first and the best of your life. Don't leave here without making that decision. If you need help with that, let us know now as we stand, as we sing.
Thank you, Daniel. I'd like to welcome everyone this morning. We ask our visitors and members alike to fill out the attendance cards that you'll find on the back of the pew in front of you so that we have a record of your attendance. Young men that pick up the cards, if you'd please come to the front at this time. And also, if you are planning on eating the Wednesday night meal with us this week, if you would RSVP on the back of that card so that they know how much to prepare for. This week's menu is hamburgers, chips, and baked beans. Those of our numbers that are sick and in the hospital that we need to remember: Laniel Gilbert, Nelda Gilbert, Joy Belizzi, Pat Hunter, Tom Stevens, Carol Anstead, Stephanie Hampton, Larry Thomason, Caitlin Caswell, and Marilyn Bush. And then those of our friends and loved ones that are outside our numbers that we also want to remember in our prayers: Kevin Holland, Jacob Moore, Christy Trammell, Hayes Roosh, Martha Hobbs, Ben Hampton, Wayne Toy, Grace Parrish, Carrie Pro, Robert Bowers, and Leon Bailey. And you can see how each of those that I listed are affiliated with us if you look in the family news. As far as upcoming events go, there'll be a ladies' Bible class meeting this week on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Also this evening, James Cudd with the Southern Africa Bible College will be coming to give a presentation. There will be a going away lunch for the Kittle family after AM services on December the 14th. And then also on December 14th, there will be a baby shower for Tommy Jr. and Caitlin Caswell at 4:30 in the annex that afternoon. And that's all the announcements I have. I will let Ethan do the youth announcements.
Oh, boys, go ahead and pick up the cards. Okay, so we're still doing the Westview Boys Home sign-ups in the back, and I haven't looked at that today. I'm not sure how full that is, but I've had a couple different people ask if it needs to be wrapped, and that would be much appreciated before we bring it up here in 2 weeks. If it were wrapped or bagged, nothing too complex, that would be great. So before you bring the Westview presents, have them wrapped or bagged. So for our parties next weekend, they'll start on Saturday. And Saturday is our party for ages 2 years old up to the second grade. And that will be at 9:30 a.m. in the annex. And we should be done by 12, but we're going to have breakfast. The teens are going to help serve at that as well. And we'll have breakfast for them. We'll do a craft, and then we'll also do a movie. And there'll be some fun things for the adults to do as well. So all of your family's invited. And then for the third grade through fifth grade party, that will be on Sunday at 2. 2 to 4 at the home of Crystal and Aaron Rogers. And if you want any specific details, you can either ask me or Crystal Rogers, and we should be able to help. That's Sunday at 2 in the afternoon. And then, of course, our youth group party will be at the Ingrams after evening worship on the 7th, and that will be a $10 white elephant limit as well. That's all I got.
Let's be standing. You are beautiful beyond description, too marvelous for words, too wonderful for comprehension, like nothing ever seen or heard. Who can grasp your infinite wisdom? Who can fathom the depths of your love? You are beautiful.
Will you bow with me? Holy Father, we're so glad that we can come to you this morning, that we can meet as a family, and that we can study your word. And Father, I just thank you so much for the lesson that we heard this morning. Father, I ask you to please help us to be a church, a people that put you above everything. Help us to practice that. Help us to change our habits, and help us to do what we must to put you first when it counts. And Father, we thank you so much for our families and this congregation and all that you're doing through it. And Father, I ask you to please give us a safe trip home and bring us back at the next appointed time. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.